Hello and thank you for buying Henson's Flying Machines Messerschmitt 109. This flying model comes on 5 sheets of precision laser cut balsa wood. Parts on each sheet can be identified using the parts list, which numbers each part according to its location on the sheet and gives the names and details used in the instructions. Begin first by marking each part lightly in pencil in order to identify them for your build. Once you've identified each part on the sheet, you're going to want to remove them using a sharp knife or scalpel, carefully cutting through the tabs, holding the pieces into the sheet. You can trim away any excess material with either a sharp knife or a small nail file or piece of sanding paper. The first parts you're going to need are parts 1A and 1B, the two opposing sides of the fuselage. To begin building the fuselage, you will need parts 1A, 1B, 2A and 3A. These form the first cross sections of the fuselage. Taking part 1A, slot part 2A into these forward holes here with the lower wing supporting the rod and the tab pressing into the top. Dry fit that into place securely. Hold it where you want it. Now, using one of the outtakes, you can gauge 90 degrees to the side of the fuselage, like so. Make sure that you're happy with the fit, and using either Balsa cement, CT or super glue, just glue where the wood meets on both sides to form a strong bond. Hold that until dry, like so. Repeat the process with part 3A, which sits slightly further back, holding it in place, using your 90-degree angle to set it into the fuselage. Glue in place. You can begin now with part 1B, the opposite side of the fuselage. Slot that over the assembled parts, like so, allowing the top tab of part 2A to fit into the fuselage on the top, like so. Make sure that as you glue them together you have a very secure bond at exactly 90 degrees, so using your offcut, just check, double check for that 90-degree bond. And glue in place when satisfied. Make sure to follow all the way along the joints, as this is going to be one of the main bonds of the aircraft. Allow that to dry before moving on. The next part needed is part 4A, which is the beginning of the nose former. This fits over the tabs and into the slots on the front of the nose. Press it down so that it fits securely. Gently press the ends together and seat it all the way around, gluing on the outside of the tabs and on the inside of the airframe, making sure to get a good bond. Any nose landings will be absorbed by this part. The next part is part 5A, the rear cockpit former, which fits here just to the rear of the slanted slat. Push it down into the tabs, as you can see. Then align it from the bottom just like so, to be almost flush with the top and flush with the bottom of the fuselage. Then just check you've got a decent 90° in there, and glue into the tab holes and along the inside edge. Like so. Part 6A is the instrument cluster. At this point you feel free to paint it or put a little card cut out behind it with some instrument details on it. This fits into the slanted tabs just forward of the cockpit here. It should rest just in place with the cockpit slightly squeezed together. Make sure you're happy with where it's sitting, and just glue on the outer edges like so, fitting down flush with the angle of the tabs. The next step is part 7A, which forms the cockpit floor and lower wing brace. This fits like so onto the bottom of the model, as you can see there with the two wing tabs facing forward. Position it symmetrically so that the tabs protrude outside and the alignment is equally distanced on both sides. Once you're happy with it, begin by gluing it to the inner wing support of the fuselage, then along the side of the fuselage, making sure that the tabs are down flush and supported. You want to get a good bond in here because this is going to hold your wings in place and support all of the wing stringers and tabs. Then turning it over, glue it to part 2A on the inside to really give it some strength, like so. Next step is part 8A, which is the cockpit floor former and can also be adapted to fit micro servos. For this purpose I'm just going to leave the cutouts in, lower it down into the cockpit here, and then just at a height near to the bottom of the floor I'm going to slide it backwards to where it interacts with the rear cockpit former, and slowly press the front edge downwards into place. Now you can see there's a slight lip on each side. It guarantees the 90° strength across the rear of the cockpit, and also intersects with the cockpit floor 7A here, giving it a lot of strength. You can fit it at any point or any height here, lower than the cockpit formers. That is going to allow you to fit some electronics into it if you want to. Now with that in place, I'm just going to glue it to that rear cross section, front, the fuselage cross former and the fuselage sides. Turning it over, give it a little bit of strength here. It's really going to hold the model together. If you have any heavy impacts of such, you can of course knock out the two small cutouts, but that's entirely up to you and your balancing. The next part is part 9A, which forms the slanted rear of the cockpit, fitting into these tabs here. The outstanded tabs here fit slowly into there, and it leans backwards, guided by the tabs against the rear cockpit former there. Now you want to bring it slightly forward so that it runs almost in parallel to there, and then glue your tabs in place, and also glue to the inside of the cockpit like so. Part 10A begins to taper the fuselage towards the tail. As you can see, it has two tabs on the top. Gently pinch the fuselage together, slide 10A down into the tabs till you get a flush fit. Turning it over, make sure that it is directly aligned to the upright struts, firmly down in the holes, and also compare the angle of the tail unit there so that you're getting the correct amount of bend, otherwise your tail will end up poorly angled. When you're happy with it, glue on the insides and also on the tabs. Part 11A forms the under scoop here. This also gives strength to the bottom of the fuselage and fits in like so. Now there is a tab on one side for guidance. This can be left out or replaced with a little cut. So holding that in place there, align it like so. Then glue along the edges. Now later, when you finish assembling the model, you can of course sand down these edges and give it a more rounded bottom look to it. Locate part 13A, which is the lower former of the nose. Slot that into the tabs just forward of the scoop. Gently align it and glue along the tabs. Hold until dry. Then locate parts 13B and 13C, which form the nose. Start with 13B on the outer, like so. Insert into the tabs. Make sure that it is down fully. Hold and glue into place. Part 13C fits just forward of the instrument panel into the same tabs there. Slides in upright, and as you can see will form that little cutaway there with the instrument panel. Glue it into the tabs on both sides, and then just the tiniest touch where the instrument panel meets 13C. Make sure not to foul the cutout into the instrument panel, as this is where the front of the cockpit glass will fit in at a later point. To begin assembling the tail section, take part 14A, the main tail upright, 15A, the little triangle, and 16A and B, the tail supports. Begin by inserting 15A into the lower of the two slots here and pushing it all the way back to sit flush. 16A fits above the wheel like so, tapered end facing forward. Hold that in place there, and then 16B will fit on the opposite side like so, pushing it up flush and aligning it to make part 15A sit parallel and at 90 degrees to 14A. This can be adjusted by moving part 16A or B slightly upwards or downwards until you are happy with the fit. Once you're happy with these parts, glue along the edges, all points of contact, including along the top section here. Make sure this is a strong bond on both sides, gluing into the hole here and on the trailing edge, like so. The assembled tail unit fits into the two slots on the very end of the fuselage tail, like so. As you can see, The two tapered ends should butt up to these parts here, with the part 15A sitting in there. Just align that perfectly straight. Check that the tail unit is running straight along the length of the fuselage, and then glue into the tab hole here along the end, along where the fuselage tail meets. Same on the opposite side. And then for extra strength, turning the model over, just allow glue to drip down the inside, like so, forming a strong bond. Laying the semi-completed fuselage to one side for now, let us begin on the wing sections, which consist of parts 19AB and 20AB, the trailing edges 19A and B, and the leading edge 20A and B. The detachable ailerons fit like so and can be fitted later on in the build. For now, put the trailing edge and the leading edges together using the jigsaw tabs provided. These should slot together simply. Once you're happy with the way they're fitting, glue along that jigsaw edge there, and the same at the rear. Once that's dry, you want to turn it over and glue on the other side. The ailerons are separate in case you want to convert to micro RC at a later date. In this case, as we're going for free flight, I'm going to glue these into place like so, simply butting them up and spot gluing along the joints. If you do want to put a hinge in these later, you can either bind here with a little bit of cotton on the holes provided, or use small paper hinges at this stage before you put on the wing profiles. The wing profiles come in three different sizes: 23A, which is the outer edge, 22, which has two holes as seen and fits into the smaller part of the triangle, and 21, which fits into the larger part of the triangle and has three holes, two oblong and one circular. Begin with part 23A, which is the outer profile, by fitting that into the rectangle here on the outer edge of the wing. Make sure that you align it with the slot slightly towards the front. Because of the nature of the laser cutting, there will be a slight variance, but if you align them all towards the front, then the center spar will line up. Glue this at the front and rear and all the way along this seam. If you are going to have your ailerons moving, you're going to want to trim the wing profiles at an angle just here in front of the aileron. Second one you're going to fit is 21, the inner wing profile here. Again, align this all the way towards the front to give you the right profile. Do it at the rear and at the front and along the sides. Then you're going to need another of the same, and just here where the rectangle steps in, you're going to want to slide one piece in there, as far forward as you can, and using a 90-degree angle, align that like so, glue on the front and on the rear and to the ailerons if you're having them fixed. There are 4 21 profiles for each wing, which is the 2 oblongs and 1 circular hole. After fitting these 2, you will have 2 remaining. You want to space these equally between the two spars. Then, using a 90-degree edge, check they fit correctly and align towards the front. Glue on the front. And on the rear. Like so. Once so dry, you want to move on to part 22, which are the two-hole profiles towards a trailing edge. There are 3 of these per wing. You can align these spaced out to fit all 3 pieces in. And when you make the reverse wing, you want to build it as a mirror image, so you can use the first as a guide to make sure you get them right the first time. Use your 90-degree to align them. Glue at the front. When you begin building the second wing, you need to lay all of the parts down as an exact mirror image. This will make sure that you're building both a starboard and a port wing. Otherwise, you'll end up building 2 wings for the same side. So just lay all the parts out, check that it's right, and then copy the exact same procedure across onto the second wing. With the 2 wing sections complete and mirrored, it's time to begin fitting them to the fuselage. Take note of the wing supports coming out of the fuselage lower. Take your first wing and aligning it with the wing profiles upwards. Slot the tab slot into the slot in the bottom of the fuselage like so. Lean it forward until it lays against the wing supports and the tab there. Over, glue along the inside where the wing meets the fuselage, just to give it extra strength, and into the wing tab. The trailing edge of the wing meets the fuselage with this shape here. Just slightly curve that upwards to be in line with the fuselage, like so, and glue into place. Allow that to set before moving on to the starboard wing. Repeat the process, slotting it into the tab, butting it up to the bottom of the fuselage, and then turning the aircraft over, lining it to the wing formers like so, and gluing it directly to those wing formers that will control the eventual shape of the wing. And gluing along the bottom where the wing attaches to the bottom of the fuselage and into the tab. Repeating the process on the inside of the wing at the top, making sure that the tab is glued in strongly, and gently bend in the trailing edge of the wing and glue in place. The next step is to start building up the nacelle or nose cone, starting with parts 24A and B, which form the base of the nacelle. Lay the parts together like this and glue along the seam. All of the edges need to be parallel. The next is part 25A, which divides across the horizontal. Align those and glue along the butt edges. Then moving on to 26A and B, divided along the vertical, butt those up like so, glue along the butt edges. And once they are dry, you can begin layering. Part 24A forming the base with 25B sitting on top of it, using the central rectangle as a way of aligning it. Align it like so, and then glue onto the seam around the outside and all the sides. If you're using Balsa cement, you can of course glue underneath, but then careful on the alignment. The next part, 26A and B together, needs to be aligned according to the centre, and then with the top and bottom of the rectangle towards the bottom like so. Then again glue all around the edges. 27A completes this section of the nacelle, fitting with the lower end touching here, and then use it as a guide, a rectangle on the inside. Glue along the inside edge of the rectangle here like so, making sure that it is homogeneous the whole way around. The next part of the nose is 28A with the rectangle cut out in it. Now this should be facing towards the lower end and give you an idea to guide there, fitting along the bottom. Just glue along the outer edge like so. And then part 29A uses the same rectangle as a guide, with the two holes aligning, and is glued around the outside edge. That gives you the nose cone with the propeller mounting slightly lower down. You can, if you want, mount this slightly further up. Also, if you are going to be converting to RC power later, you can cut away some of the profiles on the inside there. To fit the nose cone to the fuselage, take the assembled part and place it over the fitting there. Now, depending on the make of 109 you're going to build, you can fit it that way up, or alternatively, for the high-nosed blunt version, fit it like so, which I'm going to do today, and just carefully glue it in place along the edges. For extra strength, you can also glue along that inside edge there. With the wings in place, find parts 38A, B and C, which are the lower nose formers. Slot those in here, beginning with the central one, and glue into place on both ends. You should fit just into the dots here and here. Repeat the process for the two side stringers. Like so, forming the rounded underneath of the nose. The next part we're going to work on is the tail strings, which are 32 A, B, C, D and E. Now, beginning with the center one, align it from the davit in the tail upwards through the top of each fuselage part, and glue to the slanted part just to the rear of the fuselage here, and then into all of the tab slots. Tie away along and to the tail section. On the outside of the fuselage tail, take the longer stringer and place it just here in front of that section, butting it up and letting it go forward into the slat like so. Now glue it into the slot with it pressed up against that tail section just where it meets the fuselage body there. Hold it in place, glue the slot and where it meets the fuselage, and then also where it meets the diagonal on the rear of the cockpit. Do the same on the other side, like so. Be very careful not to snap these stringers. Glue it here, here, and here. And once those are complete, what we're going to do is trim all of these perfectly flush with the angled rear of the cockpit. Now make sure to save these small stringers as they can be used later to help build the cockpit fairing. And very carefully in line, just slice them away and put them to one side. They're very useful for detailing. Carefully trim. You can of course just sand these parts flush as well. And the outer ones, making sure to follow through angle for the rear of the cockpit. Both sides. Now, as I said before, put those to one side as they're going to be useful later in adding a little extra detail. Now, this model comes standard with rubber power, which uses a propeller, cotter pin and matchstick to hold it in place. So we're going to begin by taking the matchstick and folding the rubber band over it like so. Now the matchstick needs to be secured behind this section here, the front of the tail and the rear of the cockpit. Choose a position about halfway down a rectangle like so. Glue into place on the sides very securely, making sure not to foul the rubber band. Allow that to dry thoroughly. Once you're happy with it, take your cotter pin, slightly parting the ends, slide that over your rubber band and pull it down securely into the eyelet. Begin to thread that through the fuselage, moving forwards, slowing the machine over into the cockpit area, underneath the instrument cluster, forward into the engine room, and from here into the engine bay. Then you're going to want to take the bead in the kit and fit it over the two ends of the cotter pin, sliding it down flush all the way to where the rubber band meets, and then being very careful at this point as it's quite delicate, slide it through the hole in the very nose cone of the aircraft, making sure not to put too much pressure anywhere on the aircraft. You can of course avoid this step if you're going to build a powered model or use a capacitor conversion kit. Slide the two ends of the cotter pin through the propeller and making sure that it's flush. Simply bend over both edges of the cotter pin to catch the propeller for free flight. There we go. With the power band in place, whatever it is, in this case rubber band, You can also fit the capacitor kit and the motor carrier inside. You can now, once it's complete, start fitting the top of the nose, which is 33 A, B and C. Now these stringers fit into the nose like so, butting up to the front. As you can see, you can trim later at the back, so make sure that the front is right first. Glue along the slots. With the outer ones, glue from the front working backwards, so you'll need to trim before it meets the instrument cluster. Right, so as you can see here, it's bent the instrument cluster, so just trim it just forward of the instrument cluster and to the rear of that section, so that it fits flushly into that hole. Do the same on the other side. You can trim it first if you want, but there's no need. And of course, building again from the front. Glue. And trim this section and press it down flush. The last section to trim is the center one, making sure that the gap on the top of the instrument panel is clear and cutting it flush like so. Now the last stringer goes into it is the one that runs along the very bottom here, which is part 31A. Part 31A should fit into the space left between the wheel formers and just underneath the tail wheel to come all the way forward like so. Begin gluing it at the rear where it hits the tail wheel and make sure that it reinforces the tail wheel and connects. Moving forward, glue it into the slots like so. Now you can trim it away here, or if you prefer to keep that nice rounded look to the bottom, you can glue it along the edge here. I'm going to trim it away where it comes into contact with the wing support here, like so, and then just glue it in flush. That will, when tissued, give it this very nice rounded bottom, like so. The main wing spars are parts 30A and B. Now these fit starting from the outer edge of the wing all the way along the slots in the wing profiles. Lay part 30A in place, butt it up firmly against the fuselage there. Make sure that it's fitting smoothly in each of the slots. Push it along to get a nice firm tight bond and glue the inner edge to the fuselage. Then glue into each of the slots on the top of the wing profile. Now you can fit this so that it fits slightly lower down, but to get a nice look to the wing you want it aligned to the top of the wing profiles like so. Adjust it slightly as you go, and then here on the inside of the wing where it meets the wing former, just add some extra glue along there and it'll give it a lot more strength. Repeat that on the other wing, like so. Pulling it up and then gluing it from the inner edge outwards, again aligning to the top of the profiles and sitting flush. The next part to fit is the exhaust profiles, which are parts 34A and B. These fit onto the side of the fuselage here, just on top of the cutouts in this rectangle here. Dry fit these into place, making sure that they are parallel with the side of the fuselage. Make sure they're down firmly, and then just simply glue where they come into contact with all of the fuselage parts. And repeat that for the other side of the fuselage, allowing the davits to guide you into place, and glue. Our optional underwing scoops with the kit, which are parts 39A and B and 40A, B, C and D. The parts 40A, B, C and D fit into the small slots on the bottom of the wing, the tabs fitting in like so, gluing just where the tabs go into the wing. Now if you are covering this with tissue, you'll want to do that before putting these on and then clearing the space. There you are, screw that into place, and then part 39A fits with the cutout towards the rear and the two slots like so, and glues along the edges here. You can of course file it down to make them more rounded, and then just repeat the process on the opposite wing or leave them out as per your choice. Now, with those in place, we can move on to the tail section. The tail section begins with part 17A, which fits into the vertical there like so, the horizontal sliding in like so. Use your original 90-degree gauge to fit it at exactly 90 degrees and simply glue along where the two pieces of wood meet. Again, checking both sides for a perfect 90 degrees. If you're not on 90 degrees here, you're going to get some strange yaw with the aircraft as it flies. Once you're happy with it, let it settle and glue in place. Parts 38A and B are the characteristic formers underneath the tail wing of the Messerschmitt. Now these slot like so between the small gap in the fuselage tail and the corresponding rectangle in 14A. Just dry fit those into place. It may be necessary to trim them slightly. Once you're happy with a little dry fit of them, just glue them top and bottom. And they will form a characteristic 109 tail support there. Now the tail planes can be fitted using threaded hinges, or of course you could create little paper hinges for them. In this case I'm simply going to glue them in place, as this is going to be a free flight model. So aligning them exactly as you want them, check fitment on both sides just to make sure, and then just glue along the seam in spots and also along the angled edge. Repeat the process on both sides. It very quickly begins to look like the characteristic 109. Now the rudder can be fitted in like so. Just to check the fitment there, it may be necessary to slightly trim the fitment. In this case it's not, as you can see, like so. Now you can make a paper hinge for it or adjust it at a later date. I want it to sit slightly more flush, so I'm going to slightly trim this tab here, like so. The reason that is usually left proud is to give you a little bit of lee room if you are converting to RC, so that it doesn't touch that top plane there. Now I'm going to glue it in place like so. Simple butt joint all the way along, and a touch of glue along the bottom and also along the top, and that angle of course. You can see the model's very quickly starting to look like the 109. On the final leg of the model now, you can begin building the landing gear, which of course aren't necessary if you're going to be flying the model, as they will unbalance it. 35A, 35B and 36A and B. Now these need to be fit in a particular manner. On the 109 the wheels go outwards, so you're going to want to check your fit and then make sure that you're gluing to the right side of it there, like so. Now fit part 36A into part 35A and glue along the edges there, like so. Then make sure that you're molding a mirror image with the other side. Fit it into the tab and then glue in place like so. Now these slot into the little T shape here. Just align it. A little bit of nursemaiding to get it into the slot. Press it forward and pop it in, and the same on the other side until they fit quite firmly. Check that they are angled in the same direction, and then just glue all sections of the T into place. This kit also comes with foam wheels, which you can attach by putting a pin through the centre there and then wiring it over. The final details of the 109 are parts 37A and B, the cockpit, and part 12A, the cockpit front. Begin by fitting part 37A just where the angled rear of the cockpit meets the fuselage. Pinch it slightly, very gently, fit into place. This should sit at 90 degrees to the fuselage, facing upwards, like so. Can be quite fiddly, this part, it needs checking, and then just glue it where it meets the fuselage and the rear cockpit former. Now for the forward cockpit format, just dry fit it along where the second hole here is. And again, there can be some variance here, so glue one side first, like so. Just check that 90 degree. And with one side glued in place, just stretch the part across in parallel and glue the opposite side. Now part 12A fits into the top of the instrument panel like so, and lays back to connect with the cockpit there. Just sitting on top of it, glue it to the top of the instrument panel and also to the top of the cockpit format. Now, you're welcome to leave the model like that or use some of the offcuts from when you completed the tail earlier, and you can block in the cockpit there in proper Messerschmitt style, starting from the rear. Lay those along there and just glue in place like so. Then once fitted, very gently trim here, as these parts are extremely delicate. And another offcut on the opposing side. Glue starting from the rear. Just like so. You will be left with several small stringer parts which you can use for detail to fill in some of the cockpit area if you choose. That is entirely up to you and the level of skill you have and the risks you're willing to take. Alright, that is the completed Messerschmitt 109 with the telltale cockpit and tail, the landing gear in place. The kit also comes with the foam wheels to attach if you're doing a static model or a display model. And don't forget you can also get the capacitor upgrade kit for these. Thank you for buying Henson's Flying Machines.